We know the evidence. How many people die a day?
Oh, sure. I mean, 15,000 people a day.
15,000 people a day times 6 weeks.
Yeah, sure.
First
No, I
thing,
get
you have
it.
to try and get it into the UK.
Collusion, a cover-up, and yes, even conspiracy to suppress early treatment that is estimated to have cost hundreds of thousands of lives. So basically, in late 2020, Dr. Andrew Hill, he, with a team of researchers, was studying the drug, ivermectin, that we've come to know as horse paste here in the United States. But he was studying this drug, and it was funded by United, global health agency. And the early results, he was being very promising. He even came out and said, we might have a way to combat that. And then it was just a month later that his original positive study conclusions on ivermectin, they fell off the rails. And so that's what you observed happen?
Well, it wasn't exactly that the study positive findings changed. It was the conclusions that were discordant with what he had been sharing with us. It was, we were all trying to get this drug approved as soon as possible. But then his conclusions said that, to the effect that large trials are needed, more trials are needed, and so the regulatory bodies can't review the evidence until these trials are done. And the trials are still not done. So, what it did was it kicked the approval of ivermectin down the road, well, now at least a year. And there's been throughout the year further efforts from various sources to undermine the evidence on ivermectin. And so we're no closer to getting a treatment for COVID, an old repurposed medicine, approved than we were a year ago.
Now, I did read that 1 week prior to Andrew Hill's preprint posting of his revised paper, that the University of Liverpool, where he works, received a $40 million grant from United to study infectious diseases. And so do you, in your opinion, think that this amount of money had anything to do with his change of heart?
Well, I have no idea. But what is interesting is that in the conflicts of interest section on the paper, it says no conflicts of interest declared, when in actual fact the University of Liverpool had received substantial grants and money from various drug companies to support the development of competing drugs for COVID. So that would have been worthy of declaring as conflict of interest. So there are a number of issues. In addition, in the funding statement, it says, an unrestricted grant from United, but there's nothing about the role of the funder in the paper. So there's omissions that need to be clarified with regard to that paper. But unfortunately, that paper has been used by the authorities to say that more evidence is needed and the current evidence is insufficient, and so it has been a barrier to the approval of ivermectin globally, in my opinion.
Now, my attention was brought to this when I was reading the new Robert F. Kennedy Jr. book, Real Anthony Fauci, and the Zoom call between you and Dr. Hill was just bombshell.
This is an extract from a Zoom conversation between Dr. Tess Lawrie and Dr. Andrew Hill, recorded on the 18th of January, 2021. Dr. Hill's meta-analysis had just appeared on a preprint server. In Dr. Lawrie's opinion, the conclusion did not match the evidence.
Rest assured, I'm not going to let this last for a long time. I'm not saying we keep going for another year.
The fact that you're saying you're not going to let it last for a long time makes you realize the impact of your work. So how long are you going to let people carry on dying unnecessarily? Up to you. What is the timeline that you've allowed for this then?
Well, what I hope is that this stalemate that we're in doesn't last very long. It lasts a matter of weeks, and I guarantee I will push for this to last for as short amount of time as possible.
So how long do you think the stalemate will go on for? How long do you think you'll
well, okay,
allow the stalemate to go on for?
From my side, every single new trial that comes through, we're going to be aggressively adding it on. And I think end of Feb, we'll be there. 6 weeks.
How many people die every day?
Well, there is a whole group of people who think that ivermectin is complete rubbish. It's
I'm not
placebo.
talking about them. I'm not talking about them. I'm saying we know the evidence. How many people
What
die every day?
Oh, sure. I mean, 15,000 people a day.
15,000 people a day times 6 weeks.
Yeah, sure.
First,
I get
you have
it.
to try and get it into the UK.
He seemed to be really uncomfortable and making excuses. The whole transcript's in there. Tell me about how that Zoom call happened and what led up to that.
Well, I read Andrew Hill's review. It was a preprint. It wasn't peer-reviewed, but he put it on a preprint server. And before it was published, I asked him if he could send me a copy. And when I read it, which was a couple of days after I received it, I was very concerned, and I emailed him and I said, please retract the paper. It's going to cause immeasurable harm.